Manx Radio Podcasts, powered by Shaw.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Hello and welcome to the latest look back at Talking Heads. The sale of surplus horse trams, TV licence fees for the over 75s, and deterring people from using mobile phones while driving were all up for discussion on the programme this week. Here's Stu Peters.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
We're asking for your thoughts on the withdrawal of the subsidy for television licences for the over 75s. Veterans groups in the island are appealing for a rethink on the decision to scrap free TV licences for over 75s. Pensioners will have to pay the annual £145 licence fee from the 1st of September after the concession was scrapped in last year's budget. Veterans are campaigning against the change. They want a stay of execution until after September's general election, so the matter can be looked at again by a new Tynwald. The BBC is to fund pensioners' licences in the UK in future. The Manx government's in talks with the broadcaster over a similar deal here. It'll continue to fund licences for the poorest pensioners, those on income support. Secretary of the Royal Artillery Association in the island, Willie Neal, is appealing for more time.
I feel that it should have been held over until the new Tynwald was brought in. To say it's going to be at the 1st of September and then Tynwald is finished, I don't think that's a very democratic way of looking at it. We've got an ex-serviceman that I know of that his licence is due on the 1st of September and he's going to have to pay. See, you've got to take in consideration too, all those lads are ex-servicemen to the British Crown.
So, should the introduction of charges for the over 75s be put off, or is it only fair that those who can afford to pay should do, regardless of age? I wonder, it seems that the Isle of Man government, and I apologise, slightly croaky voice today, I've got a bit of a chesty cough, I think. But aside from that, I wonder sometimes whether or not the Isle of Man is slightly worried about dealing with the BBC. It seems that we always treat them with kid gloves. It seems crazy to me that they're making it so that in the UK, over 75s get free licences. Whereas in the Isle of Man, that's not the case. You would have thought that would just be a natural thing, So our government's having to negotiate the situation, apparently. You'd have thought that we could just say, nah, your pensioners don't have to pay, so neither will ours. End of. But maybe it's more complicated than that. Maybe the BBC don't like supplying TV pictures and things to the Isle of Man. Maybe they think they could save some money. And our politicians have to treat them with kid gloves. I don't know. Just to make it clear, I think a lot of people think that free TV licences mean that the BBC doesn't charge for them. That hasn't been the case so far. Over 75s in the Isle of Man since the beginning of 2002 have had a free TV licence, but the government has paid for the licence. So it's not that the BBC doesn't charge, it's that the Isle of Man government has paid for the licence, and it's costing us something like £700,000 a year. Obviously, the Isle of Man government is trying to save money wherever it can, and it's decided, and it was agreed in Tynwald as part of the February 2015 budget, that this was an area that maybe they could save some money, and it was voted through. So it's not a case, or it hasn't been a case where the BBC just doesn't charge for over 75s. They did charge and the government picked it up. It looks as though in the UK that's going to change so that the BBC doesn't even charge. Well, as far as I'm concerned, that should be extended to anybody who pays the licence, irrespective of where they are. I don't know if you've got a point of view on that. Let's go to the lines. We've got Ken on. Hello, Ken.
Hello, afternoon to you. Let's grass this by the net. Let's have a bit of civil disobedience.
All right.
Who's to pay? But having said, having looked at the recent election households, there's just over 31,000 houses registered, which equates to about 4.5 million. So let's negotiate and say, look, here's 4 million from the Isle of Man government, give us all a sort of a Manx TV licence, job done.
Yes.
Then collect the money, the 4 million that we've walked out. If we can negotiate, that is, and get a good deal. Well,
it seems that, there have been various meetings between the BBC and the Isle of Man government over the years that I can think of 2 or 3, and they never seem to extract much, or our people never seem to extract much.
Well, probably don't negotiate. They go and say, oh, it's a done deal, and, it's about 4.5 million at so just over 3,000. That's the right figure, of course, but then there's businesses. But, it's £4 million up front.
Well, and a lot of people are upset because, the Isle of Man doesn't get the same level of service as places like the Channel Islands, for example. Yeah,
negotiate hard and try and get the discount down. The the money that people say by not, sending me threatening letters. I'm one of these people that pays right at the last end.
Yeah.
You have about 4 letters. How much does all that cost? And, the fact that, admittedly, yes, it gives the local post offices some money, but it's online. But, let's negotiate and see if the Isle of Man government, if we can find 4 million from somewhere.
Yes, okay.
It's 4.5 million, but, surely we can negotiate a good discount.
Yeah, you'd have thought.
But, is there any, perhaps we don't have the money, where are you going to get this extra 4 million from? That's the point. But as for the 70, yes, these Manx people who are 75 should have the same deal as what, British
Absolutely.
people have.
It's a no-brainer to me, that. I can't understand why it's even up for discussion, to be honest.
I doubt whether it would be all civil disobedient and all refuse to pay. I don't. How much it costs to get somebody in court, though?
Yeah.
They get a conditional discharge and they just get fined costs of 50, plus you have to pay your TV licence.
Well, that's another thing that comes up on a regular basis, where people say that, these detector vans and the threatening letters and stuff, they've not got much weight. Now, I wouldn't suggest that anybody doesn't pay the licence fee and tests it, but I can't remember seeing anybody in court.
There are regional differences in Scotland. They get away with, as I've said, it's sort of like, I might be wrong, but they get away with conditional discharge. But in England, they get hit quite hard.
Oh, do they? Right. Okay.
So there's different views on, what penalties should be. But as long as they get the money, that's the main thing. It should be quite easy.
Yep, you'd have thought so. All right, Ken, some good points there. Thanks for calling. Ross says, I think it's crazy that 75-year-olds have to pay. I know many that struggle to live on what money they receive, yet alone paying more. Yeah. Recently discovered while trying to catch up on an already screened series that in the Isle of Man we can't access BBC programmes on computer or iPad, as it says only available in the UK and Northern Ireland. Yet we pay our licence fee. Yes, we do. So I've never tried it on a computer or an iPad, but if that's true, it's completely and utterly wrong. So why isn't the government doing something about it?
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
What penalties do you think would deter people from using handheld mobile phones while driving? Police in the Isle of Man have been clamping down on driving offences in recent weeks. It's part of a campaign to make the island's roads safer. Tanya Humbles has more.
Hi, you.
Hi, how'd it go?
Yeah, it went well. I'm on my way back now, so I'll tell you about it when I get home.
Okay, well, the kids are in bed and dinner's on. James? James? Can you hear me?
Using a mobile phone at the wheel is known to the Isle of Man constabulary as one of the fatal 4. It's joined by speeding, drink driving and neglecting to wear a seatbelt, the most common causes of accidents on our roads. The Roads Policing Unit launched a campaign last month aimed at tackling offenders in hotspots across the island, singled out by members of the public. Since then, drivers have been stopped by officers in unmarked cars or speed checked and penalised if they're found to have broken the law. Operation Jukebox is set to run until October.
You don't have to be in a car to cause a crash. Think. The moment you know they're driving, kill the conversation.
Tanya Humbles reporting. On this morning's Mandate programme, John Moss spoke to Sergeant Stephen Lapsley about the campaign.
Where we stand with it is basically anything that distracts you from the road. So, quite often nowadays when you get a text message, it makes a noise and appears on your home screen. A lot of people just glance down to their left-hand side whilst the phone's maybe on the passenger seat and just try and read what's off, the first few lines off the text message on the home screen. All these things are taking your concentration off the road. And sometimes taking one hand off the wheel, etc.
That's illegal, is it? Yeah, I mean, if you said that would be illegal.
Yeah, all these things that, it's not simply making a phone call and speaking through the phone or typing, or texting. You could turn your phone on and you could press your Facebook button and be flicking through that, getting your data updates. All these things, would constitute an offence. It takes your concentration off the road.
We've all seen people using their mobile phones, but obviously there's very little you can do. They just drive past using them. What can the police do to stop people using their mobile phones?
Yeah, well, it's all good and well when we stop people and give words of advice for a number of offences. But sometimes the only way of driving the message home is by taking things a step further, and that's by prosecuting or issuing fixed penalties at the side of the road, hitting people in the pocket or sending them to court. Sometimes that's the only way of getting the message through, because some people end up having 2 and 3 and 4 verbal warnings, and it's pointless. We need to take it further.
So what percentage of people, very roughly, actually get caught?
In relation to what, sorry?
In relation to mobile phone use?
Well,
very small, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, when we're out targeting it, you need to have a bit of stealth mode about you, but not that's not always the case, because the whole idea of why you cannot drive whilst on the mobile phone is because your attention is diverted to something else. So we can actually be driving around in fully liveried BMW X5 police cars, which are very big vehicles, and we still come across people on their mobile phones because they don't see us, because they're concentrating on something else.
That illustrates how much they're concentrating
Yes.
on what they're doing.
So.
Well, that's mobile phones. Obviously, the other 3 in the fatal 4 are speeding, drink driving, and using your belt as well. Most people use their belts these days, don't they?
Yeah, well, you'd be surprised how many people don't wear their belts. In the last month, since we've been running Operation Jukebox, we've discovered that the majority of people who are not wearing their belt are people who are in work vans, in HGVs, etc., etc. Most of our stops for no seatbelt have been people jumping into vans, and not so much cars, but we have been catching people in
Is
cars.
there any
as well.
leeway at all if you say you're a delivery driver?
No, we need to have, there's various exemptions. But ultimately, when people are in a car, put your seatbelt on.
Every time.
Every time, because you do not know what's around that corner.
Is Jukebox going on for a while, or is it going to come to a stop? It needs something that needs to go on all the time, doesn't it?
We can run Jukebox for however long we want. My idea is to run it for 3 months. We do these offences every day anyway. Officers around the island are doing these anyway. However, we're concentrating on it for 3 months. People are allocated Operation Jukebox inquiries. Today we have 2 from the Roads Policing Unit, and we have also officers allocated from the neighbourhood policing teams simply for that purpose. They're out catching mobile phones, speeding, and then the drink driving generally comes at the weekend. But we're out there every day, and we're up nearly maybe 75, 100 prosecutions now.
Sergeant Stephen Lapsley of the Roads Policing Unit speaking to John Moss on this morning's Mandate programme. What do you think would deter people from using handheld mobile phones while driving? Is the behaviour inevitable, do you think? Or are more and more people moving to hands-free facilities for phone calls? And is that an awful lot safer if it's a case of distraction? What do you think the penalties should be to try and deter it? The message is clearly not getting through to people. More and more people seem to be using mobile phones behind the wheel of the car. And the other thought to this is it the threat that everybody seems to say it is? And I'm not disputing it, but I just ask the question in that, it's all about distraction from the job in hand, which is driving the car. But isn't having a GPS in the car equally distracting? Isn't tuning the car radio in equally distracting? Isn't having a conversation with your passengers equally distracting? It just seems that we're concentrated on mobile phones. Maybe that's because it's an easy target and it's something that's easy to see if somebody's doing that. Let's go to the lines. We've got Pam on. Hello, Pam.
Regarding mobile phones and driving, I really do think it should be stopped. I think there need to be greater penalties. To me, it is dangerous.
Okay.
I just feel that way. I was telling Catherine, I never struck me until I was away some time ago, and I was with someone in the car. I shan't say who they were. Sure. I don't want to get them into trouble, all the rest of it, although really. And this person was using a mobile phone pretty well constantly.
Yeah.
And I felt very uneasy.
Okay.
I felt very uncomfortable, and I certainly did not feel safe.
Yes.
And I've never used a mobile phone whilst I'm driving. I certainly wouldn't dream of texting, whether it's because I'm not very good as a multitasker.
I wouldn't dream of texting either, I must say. I mean, I carry a mobile phone around with me. I don't use it very much, but if I'm expecting a call and I'm in the car, I pull over somewhere safe and take the call.
I mean, half the time if my phone goes when I'm in the car, I generally don't hear it. It's in the back of my bag. And anybody just has to wait.
So stronger penalties is the answer, you think?
Well, I think so, because to me, in some ways, it almost seems worse than some drink driving that we hear about. I know that sounds awful, but it's so obvious. You know, you've got one hand on the wheel. I mean, I know we should all be great drivers and all drive with one hand and everything, but I can remember being taught to drive way back that you limited your distractions.
Yes.
So that you were concentrating on your driving as much as possible, and you kept both hands on the wheel. And all right, you know, you can be distracted by conversation, and you can be distracted by changing stations on your radio, which I try not to do.
Yeah.
Although there again, I've been guilty of that. A sat-nav, well, I don't need a sat-nav. I'm on the Isle of Man. I know where I am. What do we need a sat-nav for?
Absolutely.
But I was always brought up with this idea that you don't have things distracting you, extraneous things distracting you. I had an idea when this subject came up that maybe if people with businesses who need to keep in touch with clients and customers and their office or whatever warehouse, maybe if it was made of law that their vehicles had to have hands-free.
Yes. Well, it's cheap as chips nowadays to get a hands-free set. You know, I mean, really, it's just a few pounds to be able to turn your handheld into a hands-free set. But I mean, my concern about that is how much safer is it if you're on a hands-free? You're still having a conversation with somebody.
I'm not convinced about it.
No,
I must admit, but maybe.
But the law is that that's okay, whereas using the handset itself isn't. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's some clips on YouTube that you see of accidents that have happened with people on. I mean, they are so graphic.
Yes, they are.
You just wouldn't want to go there. But no, I really do think that it is, and you see it all the time. I mean, hardly a day goes by you're out.
That seems to be the problem. That's what a lot of people are worried about. That, you know, it's been law now for some time that you can't use a mobile phone behind the wheel, but people just seem to be ignoring it. A lot of people, anyway. And I think that
down the road, and you think, well, what are they going to meet round the next corner?
Well, yeah, but I think that part of the problem, Pam, is that, you know, if people are stuck in traffic, then they might well decide to spend that time while they're stationary on the phone, and that, of course, is illegal. But you can understand the thought process. I'm not driving. I'm going nowhere fast.
I'm going to be here a while.
Yes.
The temptation's there. I mean, human beings, you know, we're all subject to it. We all do things we shouldn't do. And that is something, and you can't just cut off, oh, hang on, the traffic's moving, you know, and throw the phone to one side. It's life doesn't work like that.
Sadly, no. All right, some good points there, Pam. Thank you very much for calling. I hope your throat gets better soon. Stu heard Sergeant Lapsley on Mandate this morning. Interesting comments. I would also think that drivers with coffee and mugs of tea are just as out of control of their vehicle. A regular sight around 8 to 9 every morning on our roads needs more policing. That from Colin. Instant 3-month driving ban may make them think twice. Is that what it's down to, do you think? Do you think that we just need more prosecutions and more serious penalties? How do, Stu, take the mobile phones from them? That'll prevent them. Or how about HD traffic cameras, says Kev. Perhaps an automatic 10-day ban plus a fine may get the message through, says Tom. OK, Robin Peel called it such a stupid thing to do, using a mobile while driving, and it can have a range of tragic consequences. Those caught should face an automatic ban. People should pull over if they want to use the phone. If they don't, they should be banned for a year. OK. I noticed the copper quickly glossed over the exemptions. What are the exemptions, says Dave. What am I, the highway code? I seem to remember thinking back that because I was talked to once about not wearing my seatbelt. I was actually doing 0 miles an hour at the time in traffic, but that's by the by. I had to admit that I was an idiot, and they decided not to proceed with the case, so that was all right. But the exemptions, from memory, I think it's there might be some sort of an exemption for delivery drivers, but you know, people doing parcel deliveries, or I think there might be something for disabled drivers. I think there's some exemptions there if there's another mean of restraint in the vehicle, but you need to check the highway code to be sure. Stu, I thought there was a leniency on parcel delivery drivers not wearing a seatbelt. Oh, okay. Yeah, maybe I'm right then. Stu, it's not just phones distracting drivers. Modern cars are built with all sorts of gadgets and screens, even touch screens. Yes, they are. But touch a phone and it's illegal, which I agree with. All these other distractions need addressing, though. constantly looking down at the speedos, another one, to make sure that you don't go 1 mile an hour over. Speed should be the main concern to police, says Ian. Yeah, it seems that certain things that are distractions are kind of all right, and it's a bit like drugs and booze, isn't it? You know, booze is the biggest killer and the biggest threat to society, and that's all right, but marijuana, for example, isn't, and it looks a bit the same as far as this is concerned. There are all sorts of distractions in the car that are all right, but phones aren't. Nothing more distracting in the car than the wife and kids having a domestic. Can we ban them, says Cliffy. An interesting approach would be to impound the vehicle for a week on the first offence, 2 weeks on the second, 4 on subsequent offences. I reckon that the inconvenience of losing the use of your vehicle would soon encourage people to stop using a phone when driving. That from Stuart. Stu, I remember asking my driving instructor whether it was worse to cough without putting your hand to your mouth or taking one's hand off the steering wheel. That from David H. Thank you. Stu, giving up smoking has sure changed your dulcet tones, says Andy. Well, the thing is, I never used to have sore throats. I never used to lose my voice when I was a smoker, because I think that all those bad things in tobacco smoke killed all the bugs that have given me a bad throat now. So, medically, I don't know that that's much of a justification for being a smoker. Now then, my little would-be Masonic Eccles cake. Frank, you're so wrong. My old man was on the level, and that means that I've got an automatic right to join the Masons, and I've got absolutely zero interest in doing it. Wearing an apron, rolling my leg up, having my shirt under. No, never in a million years would I do all that. Although they do a lot of good work for charity, apparently. Best cure to stop mobile phone use while driving is simple, according to Frank. Minimum fine of £1,000 and a 21-day instant ban. If you're caught again within 5 years, £5,000 fine and a year's ban. That wasn't you doing a Biggles crash at Barton the other day, was it? Glad to be back, says Frank. No, not me. Has there been a crash at Barton? Exemptions, according to Michael, taxis. Strange. I wonder why a taxi driver would be exempt from having to wear a seatbelt. Don't know. Doesn't make much sense to me, but then a lot of things don't these days. Ross says here, I think it's right. Stupid to drive on while on the phone. There should be a custodial sentence of 6 months to get the point across. That would prevent other people doing it in the future. That's a bit of a sledgehammer to crack a nut. 6 months in jail for using a mobile phone. I mean, maybe if they can prove that you actually caused an accident by using your mobile phone, but if you're stuck in traffic leading to Quarterbridge, for example, nobody's moved for 5 minutes, or you're just trundling along at a snail's pace, would you put somebody in jail for 6 months for that? And it's equally illegal to somebody driving over the mountain at 70 miles an hour using the mobile phone, remember. 2 years ago, when my 2 children were young, drove about 70 miles each way to see their grandparents. No child seats needed. They argued because, well, you're on my side. I don't quite understand this. One said that if you don't stop, I'll be in the canal. Luckily, 2 minutes later, they were asleep. Kids can be so distracting. Luckily, they have to be in a belt or a car seat now. Yeah, well, this is the thing. I mean, the whole idea about mobile phones being banned is that they're a distraction to driving. My contention is that there are an awful lot of things that are a distraction to driving. Not saying that the law's wrong on mobile phones either, but, it seems that we're a little bit selective about what we decide is a bad thing with initial capitals and what is allowable. No phone call is that important that lives should be put at risk by speaking when driving or stopping in the most stupid places to answer the call. Ring back later, says Mark. Fair dues. OK, well, I think everybody's had to say about that.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
You're listening to the latest Talking Heads podcast, featuring highlights from the programme over the past week.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
We're asking for your thoughts on the planned sale of some of the horse tram carriages. There's disappointment from heritage transport enthusiasts at the news that Douglasborough Council is selling 6 horse trams. Councils deemed them no longer of operational or historical use, saying that they need a fair bit of restoration work too. Ed Oldham got the thoughts of Stuart Mullen from the Friends of Douglas Bay Horse Tramway.
The view from Friends of Douglas Bay Horse Tramway is that the news, whilst it's not unexpected, it is obviously very disappointing that we find ourselves in a situation where 6 historical and some would argue priceless assets of the island's transport history are basically going to be up for sale by auction.
But the council says they are no longer essential for historic or operational purposes. I guess this is because of the condition of them. So is it not within its rights to get rid of them then?
Yes, as I say, we're not surprised by the news that has actually come about. The main thing in recent months, obviously, has been the Isle of Man government via Isle of Man Railways taking over the operation of the horse trams for the 2016 season. That seems to be going very, very well so far, based on the Heritage Transport Festival and then also the 140th anniversary weekend, which were very, very busy on the tramway. Isle of Man Railways have taken on approximately 12 horse trams in their operational fleet, which they seem to deem is necessary for day-to-day operations. We're obviously very, very supportive of them and the continued operation of the tramway. At the same time, obviously, we understand the need of the council to, divest of the tramway's assets and potentially look for a new home for them. What is a little bit disappointing is it is relatively short notice. There is only a 2-week period between this auction being announced and the actual auction taking place. A little bit more notice may have given some volunteer and heritage bodies on the island a little bit more time to get plans in place once we found out what was actually available for auction. The oldest of the trams, number 28, dating back to 1892. So obviously very, very old and, something that is historically significant in our view.
If you're saying then if the likes of Friends of Douglas Bay Horse Tramway and others had more time, you might even have decided to try and get cash together to buy one or some of these?
It's a little bit early to say at the moment. There are some discussions ongoing that we're aware of between various individuals and groups on the island to see if the plan can actually be put into place to try and preserve some of these on island. And the nature of the trams with being a 3-foot gauge, which is not quite unique to the island, but is certainly very rare in other parts of Britain and Europe, means that there's probably going to be limited demand for them elsewhere. So ideally, we feel that they should stay on the island. And, if it is a case of heritage and volunteer groups working together, perhaps something can be put together to try and preserve them.
Stuart Mullen of the Friends of Douglas Bay Horse Tramway speaking to Ed Oldham. So, is selling the surplus carriages a good idea, or would you like to see them kept in public ownership, even if they were mothballed? Josh says, why don't this group, the Douglas Bay Horse thing, society or whatever, why don't this group put their money where their mouth is? The Corp is not there to fund their hobby, so put up or shut up. I'm guessing, Josh, that they don't really have any money as such to be able to do that. But if they have, then, it's a reasonable point, I suppose. If you'd like to have a say about this, you think that these carriages should be kept forever, mothballed maybe, on the basis that once they've gone, they're gone forever? Or do you think fair dues, if you don't need them, get shut? Bring a few quid in to run the actual service. Hi, I thought, this is from Ian, he says, I thought that Douglas Council handed the horse trams over to government, so how can they be selling the government's trams? The actual contractual details I'm not sure of. I'm guessing that the government's operating it, but the council still owns the hardware, I'm guessing. I don't know for sure, but it's likely to be something like that, I think. What do you think, though? Do you think that these carriages should be sold off? Typical of the Corp, you leave things to become run down and decay, then get rid of them, says JC. Okay. I suppose it's one of those things in that whenever we talk about heritage, people say, well, once it's gone, it's gone. You can't ever replace it. Certainly historical artefacts like these carriages, you would think that once they are gone, then you're never going to be able to replace them. But if they need such a rebuild that effectively you're going to rebuild the things pretty much from scratch anyway, then is there actually any intrinsic value in them, I suppose? We've got Howard on wants to talk about the trams. Hello, Howard.
Just, it makes me curious. They're actually listed on Crystal's auction site at the moment.
Yeah.
So I think there's 6 of them. But as we've already got them, they already had the facilities to store them, obviously. Why don't they use them for part of the apprentice training scheme in wood joinery, not wood butchers, but proper joinery, skilled joinery, and they don't have to do them all at once. They can use them over a period and renovate them to such a point that they're usable again. Because there's 2 bad weather nighttime running cars, plus some others. They're not all the same toast rack ones.
So you think that they could actually be useful for that as a training tool sort of thing?
Well, as a training, and that way the apprentices at the government school would then have hands-on training on how to do proper
All right, yeah. Not a bad idea, Howard. Thank you for that.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
That's it for the latest look back at Talking Heads. Our thanks to everyone who took part in the programme. If you'd like to get involved in the discussion, you can call, text or email between midday and 2 p.m. on weekdays, or you can share your thoughts on the Facebook page at any time. That's Talking Heads with Stu Peters. You can also listen back to each day's programme in full using the on-demand section of manxradio.com, and the website's also where you'll get an update of what's on the programme each day. You can also keep up to date with that information by liking the Facebook page or following Stu Manx on Twitter. And if there's anything you think we should be discussing, get in touch by emailing talk@manxradio.com. But that's it for now, so until next time, goodbye.
Don't sit in the slow lane. Join the fast lane right now with Shaw's all-new Superfast Plus broadband. Enjoy more bandwidth, amazing speeds and the best value on the island from just £23.95 per month. So don't be left behind. Get a piece of the high-speed action with Superfast Plus broadband from Shaw. For details, visit our stores in Douglas, Ramsey and Port Erin or click shaw.com.
Love being Shaw.
Terms and conditions apply.